Here's a story that would have been probably unthinkable 10 years ago or even in Trump's first term. A sitting president tries to indict 6 members of the opposition party for their free speech. The reason you might not have heard more about it is that Trump failed. And yet his possibly unconstitutional effort to indict 6 Democrats is a huge story. It underscores the brazen attempts to abuse government power against his enemies list, something that is so fraught. Pam Bondi vowed under oath to not have one. Well, here you're looking at it. They have one. And what we're tracking here is that in many ways it keeps failing. That's the green. And yet that's not a defense. It just means they are so extreme that grand juries and sometimes judges are getting in the way of this enemies list. Indeed, the people you see on your screen all have one thing in common, not their party, not their geography, not their race, but just that they dared to cross Donald Trump. That includes even his own former cabinet member up top, John Bolton, indicted. And it comes amid a broader crackdown on free speech in the second term, which includes people who are also on that chart, these 2 journalists, Lemon and Fort, and the raid of a Georgia election office with a possibly pretext of relitigating the 2020 election, which we know Trump lost and his term of office there over. Joe Biden served those 4 years. Everybody knows that. And yet the question is, are these armed FBI agents trying to create a precedent so they can seize more ballots in the future, as we see abroad, as well as the militarized policing of American streets? Trump says it's about deportation, but many people see abuse of power there as well, with Trump using the IRS and other powers and not going to the place where the most undocumented are. We haven't seen an ICE surge in Florida or Texas. The tactics are not all made up. This isn't just some brainstorm coming out of Donald Trump. Many of them quite specifically follow the sinister precedents of other countries, like the leaders you see here, Russia's Putin or Turkey's Erdogan. Democratic guardrails exist. Some are holding, but critics warn the fight is ahead.
He thinks he should be allowed to do and give whatever order he wants because he's a wannabe dictator.
Are we a dictatorship yet? No, but we're getting there.
They were trying to send a message that if you oppose them, if you step out of line, that they will crush their political enemies.
You guys think Trump is a dictator?
I think he's on the road to being a dictator, yes.
This is not rhetoric. This is a real problem in America. And to look at the lessons from abroad, we're joined by an acclaimed novelist, Gary Shteyngart, who's also written extensively about autocracy in his native Russia. His latest novel is Vera or Faith, also acclaimed like his past novels. And Mr. Shteyngart has noted that he was a Putin critic and he's a Trump critic, often for the same reasons. Your thoughts right now?
Yes, it's interesting. I mean, the authoritarian playbook is only so big and has only so many moves, and these moves seem to be followed throughout history over and over. And I think Trump, either instinctively or I don't know how much he reads of history, but he's able to access, or his cronies are able to access almost every level of this. Putin is a wonderful example. There's so many similarities. The only thing I would say is that Trump is moving a lot faster than Putin did. It took him, or at least a decade, to achieve the kind of control he achieved over Russia ultimately.
And let me say, we hear a lot of comparisons. People love to compare to other random places. Mm-hmm. But when you say that, you're talking about something you lived with yes. and then followed from abroad. Yes. And you're saying you literally think Trump is moving us faster than Putin declined Russia.
Absolutely. You look at several things that are happening. I just did a book tour across the country. One thing everyone is thinking about is ICE. ICE is on everyone's mind because it is a militarized paramilitary force in the middle of our cities. Putin had pioneered this quite a while ago, as had other authoritarians. In Russia, it's called Rosgvardia, the Russian National Guard. It reports almost directly to Putin, and it basically acts as a Praetorian Guard. It has, I guess its mandate is fighting terrorism or some such thing, the same way ICE's mandate is to round up supposedly so-called illegal citizens. But both of them act as a kind of guard that can do anything because, the Constitution isn't a lodestar for either entity. They look toward their ultimate leader, which is Putin or Trump.
When you look at the target list, so much dystopian literature, which is, of course, still drawing on reality, looks at the unfairness and insanity of being in a show trial. or not knowing what you're accused of, or these fundamental rights. So we'll put back up these faces on the screen. We're talking about veterans. We're talking about people who have a lot of cred. We're talking about the Fed chair, who's an elite. I think we have this. We're talking about, Jerome Powell. What does he have to do? What does he have in common with Don Lemon and a House candidate most people haven't heard of, right? Mm-hmm. Talk to us as we look at this list about what it echoes from other places, where even without convictions, this is designed to intimidate and chill.
Absolutely. Look, I was mentioning the ICE version, Rosgvardia. One thing they did after the Ukraine invasion was that they were used specifically to break up anti-war protests in Moscow and St. Petersburg. And, you ask what would happen to people who protest Putin. Well, they probably wouldn't be going through a judicial process. They'll be out of a window, thrown out of a window, or encounter something called polonium. But I think the idea is very similar. You self-censor. You know that if you get on Putin's problematic list, that you're done for one way or another. The judicial process is already predetermined if that's what they want to do. You could look at someone like Alexei Navalny, right, who was a politician who protested to Putin and ran for office, and he was eventually killed in a jail, in a gulag type situation. So I'm not saying Trump. I'm not saying Trump has reached all of these limits yet, but he's trying. He's clawing his way toward them very, very quickly. And I think he feels that if things go against him, whether at the midterms or after he's out of office, if he leaves office, right, that the repercussions for him, after all of the lawlessness that has preceded the last year, will catch up with him. So just like Putin is aware that this is an existential question, so I think is Trump.
You see rich and powerful people who have a life they want to protect often go along. And we've seen that in some of the countries you named. Do you think that's happening here in America?
Of course. Look, I teach at a certain university uptown, which has a deal with the Trump administration. You could look at that with, you name it, law firms. Every sector of society is worried. Nobody wants to lose their privileges. There's a great book called The Oppermans. It's a novel, and it was written in the early 1930s by a Jew living in Berlin, and it's about the same thing. It's about all the compromises that elites will make in order to stay on the dictator's good side, just as he's rising through power. So again, there's absolutely nothing new under the sun here. It's almost the same thing over and over. Trump adds a little bit of clownishness to it because he's kind of, in some ways, a failed Borscht Belt comic, but there's other aspects to it too. Mussolini was also a clown. He would strip his shirt off, which thankfully Trump will never do. But he would do these ridiculous things, say these ridiculous things just to keep people's attention.
Yeah. And in conclusion, since you are a novelist, the key to a good story is?
Well, it's really funny because people keep asking me, what is the great Trump novel or the great Trump art? And I always say, it's very easy. It's The Sopranos, and that's the key to it, is to have, to take somebody who is like Trump, a complete disaster, but to make a three-dimensional character of them. And nobody's done that to Trump yet, sadly.
Well, and there are lessons about that in history, because even in different places, history follows human psychology. And whether you call it bullying or threatening, intimidating, or in some cases, sadly, violence and killing,
right.
It does work in the short run. That's the tragedy. It often fails in the long run because you can't threaten everybody. We are out of time unless you have a sentence.
I just want to say thank you to the people of Minneapolis. They are a hero city, and they've changed the lives of so many people because we know that as a community we can stand up and fight.